Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señores oyentes de Uso la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. The news today, as usual, and I was commenting with my colleague here, Danny, who brings us his technical knowledge for this program. The news about this new variant, Omicron. Omicron, Danny Ramos, that's what it is. And what I heard this morning on CNN or MSNBC, I'm not sure which one, that it could be 4 times more contagious. 4 times more contagious. So that should scare a lot of people. I think more people are, maybe, more people have been vaccinated. Well, in a little while we'll read some numbers. But just in time, and I think as the scientists have been predicting, COVID, first of all, is not going away. We are just vaccinating people to resist COVID and some variants, but not all. So every time we look around, there's a new one. And so the most recent one is this Omicron, Omicron, which apparently is more contagious, 4 times more contagious than previous versions of the virus. In a way, it doesn't matter how much more contagious it is. For the more than 200 million Americans vaccinated, we want to know whether the vaccines will fight it off. Because if it's resistant to the vaccines, we're in trouble. So let's hope. I mean, Dr. Fauci did not clarify exactly, maybe expressing hope that this is something that will, the vaccines will contain this new version. But anyway, so it's like every time we look around and there's some new developments on the economy, on the immigration, on the crisis, the global crisis with climate, with the meeting of European leaders to decide what to do, to close their borders. In the meantime, Great Britain has closed the borders, has instituted stronger regulations. There are about 6 or 7 countries around South Africa that will not be permitted to travel to Europe or to the US. I think that the order is still to be issued, but very soon there will be orders not to allow any of these countries to travel anywhere. Israel has again closed its borders, no flights into Israel. So it's a little easier to contain it in a small area like Israel than, say, the US with our borders, which would not contain the virus because people keep coming in and going out. But all this to remind you to take precautions, the same precautions we've been taking since the beginning of the pandemic. Wash your hands, avoid crowded places, especially avoid groups where there are people without masks, avoid groups where you know that people are not vaccinated. Um, it is sort of disappointing to see a new version at a time when we are slowly returning to stadiums, to games. We see in Europe, as in the United States and elsewhere, people are going back to watching professional football, professional soccer, um, baseball, and so on. And it is disappointing that we have to again be concerned only because there is a new strain of COVID. Someday, when they write a book about this era of COVID that began more seriously in 2020, but was already showing up in at the end of 2019. When they start writing about this era, we will find um, more information about who did it, how it happened, how it spread, maybe even number one patient that began to spread the virus and so on. But right now, all we know, or a lot of what we know, has been speculation, accusations that it began in China with the support of the CDC. We didn't know until recently that actually there was collaboration between the CDC and Chinese investigators. What is not clear at this point is if they were involved in the research initially, that where COVID was sort of manufactured in the lab and how it escaped. And those are rumors that would begin to spread, and then people would accuse Fauci of being irresponsible, they would accuse the US of helping to spread the virus, and so on. So we should wait until there's really solid information regarding the beginning of it, how it began, who did what. But in the meantime, here we are. We are facing the reality of COVID and how it affected our lives in so many ways. The first concern when most of us found out about COVID was the fact that there will be travel restrictions. And I know from acquaintances and from news reports that one of the first things many countries did, Israel, Great Britain, and eventually the US, was to screen passengers. And in the case of Israel, even harsher measures to close the border. But we know Italy, France, the other European countries were fighting the virus alongside the United States. What was a shame from the beginning, and we know that from reports from Bob Woodward, who interviewed Trump at the beginning of the pandemic, we know that unfortunately politics intervened. There should be no political issue with this because COVID will and has affected everybody, regardless of party, regardless of politics. It doesn't matter what country, what nationality, what ethnic group. COVID doesn't recognize any of those differences. So we saw as a second tier, when people began to fill hospitals, the concerns that the nation was not prepared, that hospitals certainly were caught by surprise. And one reason, many critics of President Trump will point out that he didn't take it seriously. He did not encourage people to prepare for a virus that he already knew was could be lethal. And then when the White House began to deal with it, to announce the measures to control it and so on, there was this resistance, not only among politicians, but among in the public, sort of resistance to the truth, expressing incredulity that there could be such a deadly virus that it would practically destroy our economy and affect the economy of the world. But it did. It did. My first experience with how travel was affected was after 9/11, how our travel was affected in a way in which we had to go early to the airport. We had to have screenings at airports, take off our shoes, all that, 9/11. Then COVID came, and we have even more restrictions, and now restrictions due to the contagion. So we have dealt with this COVID since 2020. And towards the end of 2020, we saw the vaccines promising to bring an end to the pandemic. And now we are in a position in which we have seen real numbers in terms of cases, in terms of people who have died, and the promising vaccines that have actually helped large part of our population. At this point, 200 million Americans, over 200 million vaccinated, and hopefully more people will do it, because the new strain will make it even more difficult for people if they don't have a vaccine. So in the US, we have at this point 48,244,000 confirmed cases and 781,840 confirmed people have died from COVID. So that's a big number. And if this continues, we could be approaching the 1 million, not in the not too distant future, because as the scientists have predicted, there will be a wave in the winter, an increase in COVID cases, and we are already seeing it. We have seen it in hospitals that are already strained to the max. And with a new strain, we are certain to see bigger numbers. So, señores oyentes, vamos a tomar una breve pausa here en Úsala Radio. Les habla Fernando Mendez. Dani Ramos controla la máquina digital en la mesa redonda. Regresamos en un momento.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But I get it, you're busy, and busy people can't have prediabetes. I read that wrong. They can, okay? Just go to the site.
Señores oyentes de USA la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable. Desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal, les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controla la máquina digital. We have, I gave you some of the numbers, more than 48,244,000 confirmed cases, and more than 781,000 people have died, approaching the 782,000. That is a big number. Think about that. Think about the times at the beginning when they said, we could be approaching 100,000, and we thought that was horrific, and then 200 and 300 and 500, and each time expressing shock and surprise that such a large number of people were dying from an illness that can be controlled by means of vaccination. And here's another point that we should make. The breakthrough cases, meaning people who acquire COVID in spite of the vaccines, the two vaccines, and it continues to spread. A rumor that they don't work because there's a minute number of cases. To argue that the vaccines don't work because a certain number of people have died, because at the beginning, I remember one statistic that was sort of scary to hear. That it was like 6 cases in millions, which was in terms of statistical analysis, that didn't make any sense at all. There's always to be a certain number of cases outside the margin. So the fact is the vaccines work, and they are working right now. They have worked for a large part of the population. It has saved many elderly people who would be otherwise seriously threatened. And we saw another fact here. Many of the cases, the new cases that I saw, the numbers in the middle of the year, many of the new cases were younger people who were not vaccinated, between the ages of 25 and 49, people who were not vaccinated. And they form a very large group of the new patients. So anyway, a reminder, take the same precautions that we were taking at the very beginning when everybody was put on the alert. Wash your hands constantly. Avoid crowded places. Avoid gatherings where people are not wearing masks. Especially avoid places where you know people are not vaccinated. There's no way to get complacent at this point. COVID is still with us. It will be with us for a long time, regardless of vaccinations, regardless of new advances in the sciences, and so on. So, and this new strain, it's going to cause more victims. So, local coronavirus numbers. Here's the latest COVID-19 data that we have. U.S. Confirmed cases, 48,244,000, and people who died, 781,000. Tested, talking about Pennsylvania, 20,676,000, 43 cases, 20,000 higher than from the day before. Total cases in Pennsylvania, total cases in Pennsylvania, 1,725, 4,159 higher than the day before. The total number of deaths, 33,283. So it's a big number for Pennsylvania. Cases by county, they have statistics. If you check Billy Penn News, if you check phila.gov, you get more precise numbers. As of Sunday, 6.1 million people have been partially vaccinated in Pennsylvania. 5.8 million people have been fully vaccinated. Totals do not include Philadelphia, which has a separate vaccination program, or the 373,000 total doses administered by CVS. So, again, COVID is with us. It has been with us. This new strain, we should be worried about it. So pay attention to any announcements coming from the CDC. We'll say more about Dr. Fauci and the other doctors who have been at the forefront of this fight against the virus. There's another aspect of our daily life. As we know, violence has increased, gun violence. So I received an announcement calling for a rally, and this came from Andy Toy, who's an activist in the Asian community. And he and others, not just the Asian community, but also Hispanics and Indians and other people are involved in this, calling all Philadelphians. So this is a public service announcement, calling all Philadelphians to demand an end to violence against all students. There will be a peaceful rally for public safety for all on Tuesday, November 30th at 1 a.m. at City Hall. Tuesday, November 30th at 11 a.m. at City Hall. The rally is organized by the high school students who were victims of a racially motivated assault which occurred on the Septa Broad Street subway on November 17th at 3:30 p.m. The rally will seek justice by demanding, one, justice for students victims of bullying, hate, racism, and violence. Number two, safety in the Philadelphia School District. Number three, safety on the Septa transportation system. Yeah, we have seen video of assaults on the Septa system, and that's obviously that's why these people are requiring, are asking to that someone join them in this demonstration. It's a peaceful rally, public safety for all. This is not about politics. This is about safety, about how we should be protected. And so that, again, is Tuesday, November 30th at 11 a.m. We received this, I repeat, from Andy Toy, who got it from another source. Now, a curious segment in the news this morning on MSNBC. I was listening to them talk about McCarthy and the Republicans and outrageous declarations by Marjorie Taylor Greene, attacks on Muslims, etc. And it's sort of it wasn't Taylor Greene who attacked him initially. It was another congressperson who apologized. And Taylor Greene jumped immediately and said, no apologies for people who fight against us, criminals. And she doubled down on this insult against Muslims. So the commentary was about how Kevin McCarthy has encouraged this kind of thinking. He is afraid to chastise Marjorie Taylor Greene and other people who made racist remarks. Why is Kevin McCarthy afraid? He's afraid. He wants to be speaker, and he's afraid that if he attacks some of these Republican right-wing nuts, that Donald Trump will not support him and the other Republicans, even if they win Congress in the next election, that they will not make him speaker. And so that's a big concern for this career politician. He doesn't have a road to, say, the Senate, to become senator or to become governor of any state. Kevin McCarthy has only one place to go, and is Congress. And the only way he sees himself as a winner there is if he is the speaker, which is one of the main reasons he and McConnell had endeavored to protect the Republican right-wing nuts who spout racist rhetoric, who attack their colleagues Um, one of the attacks was about uh, one congresswoman. She's a Muslim, and this other congresswoman said that she was dressed as a Muslim, that she was one of the attackers of the Capitol on January 6th because she was a Muslim. An absurd accusation. And as I said, Marjorie Taylor Greene doubled down on that one. Even after an apology was issued. So, why is this woman who lost her committee assignments, and therefore all she does now is she's free to float from one extreme statement on the media or whatever media will publish her to another. So she's still on Twitter, she's still on social media, sponsoring negative comments on race, on politics, attacking Biden, attacking Kamala Harris, and that is her main role right now. And McCarthy is afraid to punish her because she has the support of Donald Trump. So Donald Trump is still casting a big shadow on his party. It is actually the party of Donald Trump. And I don't see McCarthy or McConnell or even people like Mitt Romney and other Republicans raising their voices against Trump. What are they afraid of? If they could get their act together, these Republicans who have more common sense, more of a conscience, if they could get their act together and voice unanimously a rejection of Donald Trump and his politics, he would disappear. But look what happened. Donald Trump had retreated to Mar-a-Lago and he was on the run. He was into oblivion. And who went to salvation? He went to rescue him. Kevin McCarthy went down to Mar-a-Lago to rescue Donald Trump from oblivion. So there's that famous picture of Donald Trump and Kevin McCarthy. So that was the official way in which Trump was again recognized by Republicans as their supreme leader. Bueno, señores oyentes de Usa la Radio, vamos a tomar otra breve pausa. Aquí en la mesa redonda les habla Fernando Mendez. Pastor Phil is now at the controls. Regresamos en un momento.
You ever had this food before, or it's like the first time you were here?
Yes,
Couple times.
Couple times.
Yep.
Yes.
So what do you order right now? Which one?
We got the chicken tikka masala
Yeah, I got the
and the butter.
Oh, so the Indian and Pakistani food is a little bit spicy.
Yeah.
So you tolerate the spice or everything?
I like spice, but we got the mild.
Oh, okay. So it's
But I can do spice.
and you?
Yeah,
Like
I
spice?
mean, I can somewhat handle spice. Not too much, so that's why I got the mild.
Señores oyentes de Usa la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable. Desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal, les habla Fernando Mendez, Pastor Phil at the controls. Well, another annoying item, because it seems to be that today is a day for annoyance from all these items. That should be the title of the show today, annoyance. Besides the new strain of COVID, we'll talk about that mutation again in a minute. There's another virus, political virus in this case, Let's recall one thing. For most of the 20th century, after the Bolshevik Revolution, for most of the 20th century, we represented democracy. Now, we were not saints. The U.S. committed some atrocities by supporting dictators in Latin America. But that was an economic decision to support them because we had oil in Venezuela, we could get copper from Chile, and so on. There were decisions made to sort of increase our trade. Not necessarily to impose an ideology that is sort of alien to the human spirit. The Russians, on the other hand, for most of the 20th century, identified as the Soviet Union, the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, after Stalin had killed, 20 million people. It was later Khrushchev who said that Stalin had killed all those people. And after the Soviet Union, World War II, had taken over what became known as the Iron Curtain, that was named the Iron Curtain by Winston Churchill. Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, all these countries have been taken over by the Soviet Union. And for most of the years between 1944, 45, and 1989, 90, the Soviet Union controlled them with an iron fist. There was no freedom of expression, no freedom to travel. The state, as in every Marxist country, the state controlled the means of production. The state controls everything. So, and that's how Cuba became Cuba. That's how Fidel Castro became the leader of the Marxist revolution in Latin America, he and Che Guevara. And that's how they spread that venom throughout Latin America. And it was like they were the darlings of the intellectuals in Latin America, because there was only one way that you will be recognized in Latin America as a true intellectual, only if you were from the left. If you believed that Fidel Castro was the greatest leader alive, if you bought into the philosophy of the Cuban Revolution, spreading poverty throughout the continent. So that's what they did. And they took over Nicaragua until Daniel Ortega impoverished that country, and then he was thrown out. They did the same thing to Venezuela. They did the same thing to Cuba. Well, Cuba, there were great claims of advances. Cuba with literacy rates of 98% and population so well educated, but so well enslaved also, because the ideology was just too strong. So for most of the 20th century, the only country that opposed the USSR juggernaut that took over the continent, and that spread that revolution throughout the world, the only opposition they encountered, valid and strong opposition, came from the United States, came from NATO, our European allies. And in the meantime, the leftists in our countries in Latin America were trying to sell us the same Kool-Aid. Venezuela became the latest victim of that kind of thinking with Hugo Chavez, and then Nicolas Maduro took over, and there we are. And Venezuela is a basket case, one of the richest countries in South America. And Nicaragua is now struggling with shaking off one more time, and this time perhaps not able to do it, trying to get rid of this guy who impoverished the country, who enriched himself and his family. And you can see in his pictures how proud he is of what he was, a Marxist. Why? So, I don't know. I think that the United States should do something, but Daniel Ortega, before he gets entrenched in the way that happened in Venezuela with Chavez and Maduro, I don't see a way out for Venezuela at this point. Maduro is going to be there. Chavez made sure that the Constitution guaranteed the existence of the Marxist Party. And now Daniel Ortega wants to be president for life. So that's another thing we have to worry about. That is the backdrop. That is the framework for a comment about something that was just published, a combined editorial by the Russian and the Chinese ambassador. The Russian and the Chinese ambassador. Think about that for a minute. What image comes to mind immediately in terms of, think this, think freedom of speech, think freedom to write, freedom to travel, individual freedom of any sort. And think of Russia and China in that context. And how would you fare in either one if you felt that you needed to demonstrate for human rights, for freedom, for liberty to some of the press people they put in prison? Those two countries, Russia and China. So, but in a combined editorial, the Russian and the Chinese ambassador decry American democracy. The two countries were not invited to discussions of democracy at the White House. Taiwan and Ukraine, why they were invited, and that angered Chinese and Russian diplomats. So they are lecturing us on democracy and civil rights, pointing out that we have riots and that our riots have required police intervention and that there are so many cases of injustice in this country. And nobody's going to deny that. That is true. But for the most part, in this country, you are allowed to demonstrate peacefully. You are allowed to speak your mind. That's not allowed in those two countries. The Chinese put down the demonstrations in Hong Kong very quickly. And we know how Putin would react in Russia if anybody attacked him. For starters, let's see what happens to the opposition in Russia. Anybody who opposes him ends up in prison. And Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua is following the same pattern. He's putting people in prison. Anybody who wants to oppose him goes to prison. Anyway, so here we are. These two countries who would not allow freedom of the press, who represent, in fact, the opposite, would preach to the United States about human rights and democracy, because nobody would deny that some atrocities have been committed in the United States, that there have been cases, very clear cases of injustice, especially for Black people who end up in prison in large numbers for small infractions like marijuana and drugs, most amount possession of drugs. So we're not claiming total purity, but we certainly can claim to the world that we have tried to live by democratic ideals, that we have tried very hard to live by the Constitution that was created at the foundation of this nation, that we have deviated occasionally, that we have had problems, nobody would deny. But it really takes nerve for Russia and China, united against the United States, expressing concern about human rights and democracy. Those two concepts are alien to them. Those are strange feelings to them. Whatever happens in those countries, human rights are not one of their concerns. The state, the survival of the government is their concern. So here we are. In the defense of freedom of any kind, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to travel, freedom to do anything. In this country, you can do it. We might be limited by our means to do it, money-wise and so on, but we can do whatever we want in this country. That's not the case elsewhere. So it's a source of annoyance to have these people telling us two countries which are well known for their abuses of human rights, especially Mr. Vladimir Putin, to tell us about how we are not doing the right thing in this country. We are a nation that stands, even with all our defects at this point, we are a nation that stands for democracy. We are a nation that constantly tries to protect human rights. And we have come a long way. I know all these other countries will bring up the fact that there are racist policies in this country. And yes, there was tremendous racism in this country. A lot of that has been remedied. We have taken giant steps to remedy it. That there are missteps, that they're one step forward and two steps back sometimes. But that we stand for freedom. We stand for democracy. But even to the extent that it has been misinterpreted, the Second Amendment about the right to bear arms, and the extremists who love to buy more and more weapons, more than 300 million weapons in this country out there in the street, and some powerful weapons that you don't need to hunt, some powerful weapons that you don't need even if you want to defend your house, your castle. But they love to quote the Second Amendment. They forget about that little bit of it that says a well-regulated militia. And I think that's what the Founding Fathers envisioned. And that's, I don't know, it's one of those things that People who support violent means to survive, violent means to promote their ideas. They just, all of them want weapons of every kind. So we're going to take a brief pause here en Usa la Radio. Les habla Fernando Mendez, Pastor Phil at the controls. Estamos en la mesa redonda. Regresamos en un minuto.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Señoras y señores de Usa la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal, from the city of brotherly love. Les habla Fernando Mendez, Pastor Phil and Danny Ramos at the controls. So we have, again, a reminder, this Omicron variant. I like that name. You know, actually, it's foreign because it's a deadly virus. Omicron sounds like something like, if I had a network, I would call it my Omicron network. But in this case, obviously, now the name is tainted because it's a variant of COVID. I don't know how they came up with that name. The World Health Organization declared Friday a new mutation of the COVID-19 to be a variant of concern, citing potential increased transmittability and possible increased resistance to immune protections and vaccinations. Wow, that's more scary. Potential increased transmissibility means that it will spread more easily because it's easy to acquire it. A possible increased resistance to immune protections. So it may defeat the vaccines. That would be bad news. Fauci didn't say one way or the other. I want to read more about what he thinks regarding this, but I don't know. Dubbed the Omicron variant, this strain was first detected in South Africa. Primero llegó a Sudáfrica y luego muchos países inmediatamente instituyeron leyes para impedir que la gente entre, si no está aún la gente vacunada, pero con esto de un nuevo COVID, una nueva versión de COVID, muchos países están preocupados, especialmente les han prohibido la salida o la entrada a sus países a gentes que vienen de cerca de 6 países alrededor de Sudáfrica. A number of countries instituted travel bans from the region. However, by yesterday, the variant had been detected in the UK, Hong Kong, Australia, and elsewhere. I think Canada was one other place. Average daily cases in South Africa have jumped by roughly 600% over the past 2 weeks. Omicron has around 50 mutations, including more than 30 on the virus's spike protein, the structure used to connect the human cells. Some of the individual mutations have been linked to decreased protection against general infection. There is no evidence to date of an increased risk of severe illness of death or death. So, okay, here we are. So a little caveat. This sounds very scary at the beginning, a new variant that is more contagious than the others, that transmit with more ease, and that possibly could overcome the protection of the vaccines. But That said, we don't want to create the impression that this is happening here already. First of all, there are no cases in the United States so far. As of today, as of this time, on November 29th. But just be alert, be aware that there is this new strain. If you experience any discomfort, any sense that you are ill again, and you have been vaccinated, even more of a reason to go to your doctor right away. So this is the Omicron variant. So the news came from the World Health Organization on Friday. I'm telling you, once we think that we're out of the woods with some of this stuff, it comes back. Scientists noted thousands of mutations of the SARS-CoV-2 virus have been observed as they spread around the world. So there's another, SARS has also been traveling around the world, but apparently the main threat right now is this new strain. Maxwell trial begins. Opening arguments begin today in the sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, the confidant of deceased sex criminal Jeffrey Epstein. So some of these people will remain in the news. I just love it that this Epstein character keeps popping up. And to no shock, there was a connection with Donald Trump. There are pictures of Epstein with Trump, who claimed not to know this character. But one of the main culprits in that case of abuse of young women by Epstein was this Ghislaine Maxwell. So she's a British socialite. She's 59 years old. She's been tried for some of those crimes. She was a business associate of Epstein, and this will be in the news for the next few weeks, I suppose. And again, I would like to close today with this, brief editorial about, please, Russia and China, do not tell us about human rights. Do not tell us about the Constitution, especially like the Russian ambassador who felt so comfortable in the Oval Office next to Donald Trump. You no longer have a friend in the White House, and you certainly don't have too many friends here. These two countries, Russia and China, I know you are responsible for a lot of human rights abuses, so we don't want to hear from you to that respect. Well, señores oyentes de Usa la Radio, muchas gracias por su sintonía en el día de hoy. Se despide Fernando Mendez. Danny Ramos and Pastor Phil directed this program. Hasta la próxima. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news.